This conference will now be recorded.
I don't see either of our names yet. It's gonna start.
On yesterday.
No, it isn't. So,
Well, maybe.
Hey, Steve, this is Dan and Douglas. I have 4 other people that are trying to get their go-to meetings logged in. And they're having trouble hearing the voice.
Sure.
Just wanted to let you know we're a couple minutes behind in getting set up.
Okay, but you can hear us fine?
From my workstation, yes, not from theirs yet.
Okay, great.
It's the first one. I don't see anybody else. That's us, right? Come on, guys, really, 3 minutes.
Is the volume up on this?
Oh, where is the volume? Okay.
Yep, here, oh, let's see, right there's the.
For my folks that can't hear through the computers, we're dialing in on the phones now.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right, well, let's, while people are still phoning in, we'll get started. So thanks everybody for coming. Looks like we've got about 70 people on the call. And so we are going to record this so that and then we can distribute it like we have in the past, just so that you've got that if somebody misses a part or you get somebody new coming in or for whatever purpose. And then, you know, Summer's going to present this to us. As I said, we're recording this. We'll have opportunities for questions. But again, we'll get the recording out after we get it resolved, probably tomorrow. You know, I think this is one of the big pieces when I talk to people throughout the country that are talking about vote by mail is like, how do you verify the signatures? And so when I explain to them when we've got training based on forensic handwriting experts and the consistency that we do through the state, people feel a lot better. And so just know that part of this training and the things that we've done for a long time are being looked at throughout the country as the best way to do things. So you know, that's credit to you and really puts a lot of value and importance to what we're doing here with this training. So with that, I will turn it over to Summer and she'll take it away. Maybe.
Maybe.
Are you on mute, Summer? And while we're waiting for Summer to come on, if we could just have everyone mute your microphones, unless you have a question later in the presentation, that'll help. There's still a number of you that we're getting feedback on and can hear your conversations in the background. So Summer, are you here?
well, you know, one that I can work at the same time. So give me just a second. Okay, thanks.
All right, technical difficulties. So Summer's calling in. She'll be online in just a second.
All right, can everybody hear me now? Is that better?
Yes,
We can hear you.
Oh, thank God. Okay, sorry about that. I have the 17-year-old's gaming headset and it is more complicated than I know what to do with. So thank you for joining us this morning. I am at home, like I said before I realized the microphone was dead. So I apologize if you hear my dog barking. He should still be sleeping, but he's not. Anyway, to start with, this is essentially the same training that we gave last year. We basically just go into the details of verifying signatures and what constitutes or what pieces of a signature to use to determine a match or no match. Let's see here, gotta get this set up. So we'll be talking about letter forms, handwriting characteristics, evaluating signatures, and whether or not to accept or reject individual signatures. We've got images of different signatures to illustrate the characteristics that one is to use, as well as some examples of multiple signatures to determine whether or not it is a match or no match. So we're just going to jump right in, and we're going to start with letter forms. Let's see. It's helpful for us to all have the same terminology to use when talking to voters who have had their signature rejected, or other people who are questioning why a signature may have been accepted or rejected. So this is very pretty self-explanatory based on the illustrations. You know, the body, stem, ascender, descender, what's above the line, what's below the line, what's the meat of the letter, I guess. So we've got some of these here, obviously, and eyelet, boat, compound curve, all of these terms are fairly standard. I've done a lot of research over the years as to make sure that the language that we're using, because it really is helpful. The language that we are using is consistent terminology throughout forensic handwriting. And Heather, I can't remember her last name all of a sudden, but Heather, who did the original training, gave us a really good foundation to build on. And the terminology hasn't changed. So crossbar, retrace, IDOT, again, very self-explanatory. Check strokes, flag strokes, initial strokes, end strokes, arcade motion, garland connection. How people write doesn't change. They're usually doing a mental model of what they learned in school. The challenge is, as the years go by, handwriting or cursive is taught less and less in school. So you're gonna, some of the ways that the letters connect in a signature are going to be changing. It's actually one of the things that I've been researching, is just how that could affect us. So I believe Steve had said that one of the greatest challenges that we face, especially as a vote by mail state in the next few years, is just how to, when everybody starts printing their signature, how do you determine a match? So here we have handwriting characteristics. These are the characteristics that you're going to use to determine if you see more similarities than dissimilarities between the characteristics of the signature under evaluation and the characteristics of all signatures contained in the voter registration record. At this point, I'd like to highlight that it's not just a matter of matching the signature that you're looking at one-to-one with a signature in the voter's registration record. You can make a match between the combined characteristics of multiple signatures. So it doesn't have to be one-to-one. I will say that all of the signatures on this sheet are friends and family members of mine, so I know that they won't get irritated with me for sharing stuff. So style is the most basic evaluation. So for example, Kenna here, she turns 21 years old this Saturday. She was not taught cursive, and so this is her signature. She did register to vote online after Instagram told her to. So this is actually her DMV signature, and I noticed on her ballot, she did connect the letters a little more stylistically, a little more fluidly. This is her brother, Dylan. He's 5-6 years older than she is and was still taught cursive. The style encompasses many characteristics, such as proportion and slope, and it's based, historically, it's been based on the copybooks that people were taught from. So for example, Patricia has a much more sophisticated signature than either Dylan or Kenna. So, and then Gladys, these individuals, all of these individuals here are well over 50 years old and most definitely were taught from a similar copybook over the course of their education. So for example, if you look at Clifford and Donna, those D's are very, very similar. And that's because they learned from the same copybook. So style is the overall evaluation. You want to look at the basic construction. So cursive, hand printing, a combination of the two, any of those things. Skill, the relative proficiency of the writer, and how closely do they follow those copybook forms. These are signatures. Over here are historical signatures of presidents, William Shakespeare, very formal, very by the book. If we were to look at my signature, it would not, there's no copybook about it. Printed, how these signatures connect. So it's the skill of the writer. Alignment refers to where the person starts writing above the line, the distance above or below or on the line that the person starts writing their signature. Does it go up one way? Does it start below the line only to finish above the line? This is a fairly, it's one of the pieces that's really hard to change. In doing this training last year and researching it, the information, and there's an exercise later on, one of the things that I realized is that when trying to sign someone else's names, one of the hardest pieces is alignment, because no matter what I thought I was doing, starting, where the person usually signed on the line, that didn't really work. My brain automatically took over, and my pen ended up always going to where I normally start my signature on the line, not where the other person. The other piece was pen lifts, which were surprising. It was very hard to replicate where an individual lifted their pen and how they connected the letters of their signature. So it's just look to the alignment. If you have questions about whether or not the signature is a match, it should be definitely looking for at alignment, because it is one of the hardest pieces to naturally replicate. Fluency is a word that I would really like to get rid of, but unfortunately ran out of time for researching or documenting a clearer definition of what it is. It's the speed and line quality of a signature. You can determine the speed by looking at the initial and terminal strokes. You can also look at the thickness or taperedness of the line in the middle of the signature. So if a signature is not genuine, it typically has a more consistent ink level, because someone is writing very slowly, and there is no change in pressure, which normally happens in a regular signature, a normal hand signature. The line quality obviously is affected when you're signing a name that is not your own. Typically, you are really thinking about how those letters are connecting, and so your line can be jagged. It can be of consistent thickness, and there can be lots of pen lifts. On the next page, and I will say though, a lot of those characteristics also apply to ill individuals or older individuals who may have some form of impairment that prohibits them from signing their name as they once did. But on the next page, we've got some examples, specifically about shakiness of line quality. There is a definite difference between the one signatures down here on the bottom. This is definitely a shakiness due to age. It's the poor line quality is very different than the shakiness of this, which is definitely a forgery, where this is someone writing really slowly trying to disguise their handwriting, and this is age related. As I was saying about looking at the line quality in the middle of the signature to evaluate speed and fluency, a good example is Babe Ruth's signature here. You can see that this line is thinner than other aspects of this. And so it denotes a genuine speed. The person had different pressure as they were going through their signature, as opposed to these two signatures down here, where the lines are remarkably the same thickness, denoting a slow speed. Let's see here. Proportion is of course, the relative heights and widths and strokes of the letters. This is remarkably similar, or rather there's remarkable consistency, which is why, of course, it's used. It's how far below the line do they go? What is the difference between the top of the letters and the lowercase letters? And it refers to how far below the line ascenders and or how far up ascenders go, how low descenders go. Let's see here. Spacing, many types of spacing between letters, between individual parts of the name. One thing I will caution on this, one of the things that I've noticed in verifying signatures on petitions, the signatures from DMV frequently they don't match how people sign petitions. I'm not sure exactly what you guys see regarding the ballots, but one of the things that I've noticed is that oftentimes the signatures that the DMV sends, they are compressed, and whether that is something that the signature capture equipment that DMV has, or if it's a matter of somebody who they're given a 1x5 or 1.5 by 5 inch capture pad and told to sign in the box, whether or not they have a large signature and whether or not they can fit it all in that box. So spacing can definitely be affected by how the person or where the person was signing the exemplar. So if you've got a ballot signature and they've got all that room to sign, but the signature that is on the voter registration or contained in the voter registration record was captured in a different manner, a more compressed or a smaller area, just be aware of that. Be aware of how that exemplar signature was made, because the spacing may be off. For example, I know my signature, I was practicing earlier this morning and comparing it to the DMV signature that is in OCBR for myself. And my genuine signature that I put on the ballot is much larger and much more spaced out than the one in that the DMV has for me. They're still spot on, but if you're relying on spacing alone or focusing on spacing, just keep that in mind. So slant or slope is another characteristic that is fairly innate, and it's the angle at which the person writes or signs their name. The baseline can be visible or inferred, but there's right leaning, true up and down, and then left, and it's fairly consistent. Size, it's again the assessment of how big or small the writing is, whether or not it telescopes, meaning it grows larger or smaller from one end to another, and size is relative to, in comparison to what it's being signed on. So is it unnaturally large? Are the letter forms really big when they've got a really tiny space to write? Or are they really small? We've got someone in our office that no matter how it's written, no matter how much space is available to write, the signature is very small, whereas mine is giant, very, 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 very large, spread out, lots of loops. Pinlifts, as I was saying, these are the most, for me, these were the most challenging, or are the most challenging to replicate in a signature. And it's something that I have been focusing on more when verifying signatures. And pinlifts can be subtle, or they can be very dramatic, and they are obviously found in genuine signatures and in forgeries. And I should clarify, by forgeries, I mean, it's in most instances, what we're dealing with are, on ballots certainly, are individuals, family members who sign other family members' names. So forgery always, to me, is a legal conclusion that implies an evil intent, whereas these people are normally just trying to be helpful. But what you can see is for John F. Kennedy here, lots of pen lifts between letters, spacing, and lifts in unusual places. If I were to try and sign his signature, I would struggle to make those same pen lifts. And it's very challenging to do. Hoover here doesn't have a lot of pen lifts. Once he crosses his H, he keeps going. And so even in both his first and last name. Chester A. Arthur, same. Not a lot of pen lifts, if any. Donald Trump. So it's just yet another characteristic that is available for you to evaluate to determine whether or not the signature is a match or no match. So in general, those are the pieces that you will use to make that determination. You're looking for general uniformity and consistency between signatures. And these, what you're looking for is laid out in the Vote by Mail manual, which is adopted by rule. So these are the standards that were created by the forensic handwriting expert. You're looking to make sure that the overall style and general appearance of the signatures is the same. So for example, Kenna, her signature in her voter registration record is printed, but she signed with cursive. Those don't match. And it was very clear that they didn't match. But there's, yeah, so there's some, that's the easiest one to go for. Irregular spacing, slants, or sizes of letters are duplicated in both signatures. Agreement of the most distinctive, unusual traits of the signatures. So I really wish I should have just pulled up my signature. My signature is very distinct. I have a lot of loops, and the number of loops is always the same. So you can choose to focus on those one or two very unique characteristics, or take a broader look. Oops. So we direct you to examine the entire signature or to look at those really unusual characteristics. A signature that possesses one or more distinctive dissimilarities from the signature in the voter registration record should be reviewed by multiple people before it is outright rejected. Only signatures possessing obvious and predominantly matching characteristics with the signatures in the voter registration record should be accepted. So you are looking for, again, more similarities than dissimilarities. Something in the quality of their signature, in the overall characteristics that allow you to say with certainty that the same hand created both signatures, and that you see more matching characteristics than unmatching characteristics. So last year, what Lydia did, because Lydia was helping out, she had a really good idea of taking this signature and attempt to copy it multiple times. And so I'm going to ask that you do that, and I'll do it along here. And this is Thomas Jefferson's signature. And try to copy it in a manner that follows his pen lifts. For example, there's a pen lift here. I don't see, well, there's another one here probably, but try to sublimate your natural characteristics and adopt his. It's very challenging, even if it weren't this particular signature, which is way fancier than I certainly write. It is, I'm going really slow. My hand is very shaky. And I am having a lot of problems not stopping the pen, and I stop it and it leaves a little dot of ink. Yeah, just not successful. Frequently, when we're verifying signatures and a questionable, well, when we verify signatures, we instruct staff, when in doubt, throw it out. And it will always get a second look. So everything that's rejected gets a second look. And Lydia and myself are the team members who have been verifying signatures the longest. And so between the two of us, we often will review signatures and try to determine if we see more similarities than dissimilarities. And what we will do to evaluate the signature is we will visually, mentally take our hand and write that signature out. So we're looking for where the pen lifts happened, how the letters connected, what the flow of the signature was as they were writing it on the signature sheet versus how they were writing it on the voter registration card or the DMV signature capture pad. And that really does assist us in determining whether or not we see more similarities than dissimilarities, because we're then able to focus on where the differences are and or where the similarities are and exactly what those characteristics or what those common characteristics are. So, as I said, you can use a global examination or a individual, look at individual characteristics. These are the characteristics that you would use for global examination. The type of writing, hand printed, cursive, or a mix of two, the speed of the writing, assessing the strokes, as well as changes in pen pressure, line quality, if there's a tremor, or tracing guidelines. It would be, I would think it would be unusual for us to see tracing, just the nature of the envelopes, more apt to see that in signature sheets. Although what we frequently see at our level is a circulator that will have a sheet of genuine signatures, will then pass those names around to other circulators who then just attempt normal hand forgery, where they're just signing the person's name with no visual matching between the signature sheets. You also want to look at this relative skill of the signer, the style of writing, overall size and spacing and proportion, the slant, slope, and the style and construction of connecting strokes, position of the signature on the line or baseline. So these are all the overall look and feel of the signature. These are the characteristics that you want to hang your hat on. Localized examination is much more detailed. You're looking at get any letters that are given that are massively disproportionately oversized, undersized, that are given preference. So for example, my signature, my S's are huge. My descender is very, very large, and it's always consistent. The internal spacing between the letters, assess the letter combinations, how things connect. Look to the individual letters as opposed to all of them combined. Same with proportion, the presence or absence of pen lifts, letters or letter combinations that have a different slant or slope. Basically, you're looking for pieces of a signature that are distinct, that are unique to that individual. Let's see here, give me just a second here. All right. Identify any consistent, unique characteristics between the signatures. If a global overview does not demonstrate more similarities than dissimilarities between the signature and the signatures in the voter registration record, conduct a localized examination, picking every characteristic of the signature in order to make a determination. Definitely, in doing that, you want to not forget how the signature in your exemplar was made. A voter may sign much differently depending on the context. I've also been thinking about, just since we are getting so many signatures from DMV, I've been thinking about even the height that the signature is captured at. For example, the DMVs here in Salem, the counters are chest height, or at least I'm short, so they're chest height for me. And so my arm is raised up significantly and always at an awkward angle as to how I sign that signature capture pad. So there may be many reasons for the differences that you see between the signatures in the voter registration record versus on the ballot return envelope or on a signature sheet. You only want to accept a signature, again, that you see more matching characteristics, more similarities than dissimilarities, and that is the language that we use frequently. People are always asking if we see a match or no match. We try to stay away from that language just because that borders on, that's more legalistic in our view. And again, we deal only with signature verification on petitions. So, and typically we're being asked that question by an observer. So we like to focus on, we see more similarities than dissimilarities between the characteristics of the signature on the page versus the signatures versus the characteristics of all the signatures contained in the voter's registration record. A single distinctive trait is not sufficient to conclude that the signatures are by the same writer. For example, going back to the just people of the same era, people who were taught from the same copybooks, and it's not just the era, it's the part of the country that you lived in when you were growing up even. There are so many characteristics of generations handwriting that are the same. For example, it's often difficult to tell like a Robert Montgomery, they all have a very similar visual feel. And it would be inappropriate to determine acceptance based on just one single distinctive trait, because what may appear distinctive initially may actually be part of normal copybook reproduction. So it may be part of a mental model that everybody has because they were all taught from that copybook. And conversely, you can't just accept a signature from one distinct trait. You shouldn't reject a signature for if there is a single dissimilarity or a something is missing. As I said earlier, it does not have to be, the signatures don't have to be a one-to-one match. So if the registered voter is Robert Montgomery, he doesn't need to sign Robert Montgomery. He can also sign Bob Montgomery, because what you're looking at is the characteristics. We do this frequently at our level with women who have apparently gotten married or divorced and their names have changed. It is a frequent occurrence where the last name will be different. We are still able to make a determination as to whether or not that person is the person who signed the petition sheet, because we're looking at the characteristics of those signatures and comparing the characteristics as opposed to the actual letters in the name, if that makes sense. So if there are more dissimilarities than there are similarities, another person must review that signature. You don't ever want to reject a signature or a ballot based on one visual review by one person. And there are certain characteristics that are predominant in forgeries or normal hand forgeries, where somebody is just trying to sign somebody's name, family members. There are hesitation marks, nervous lines, awkward changes in writing direction. If you signed along Thomas Jefferson's name, it's very obvious when somebody's hand, when it's someone's hand that's not used to signing that signature. Disconnected lines, uneven flow of ink that is not necessary. Uneven flow of ink means if you've got like a ballpoint pen and you rest it too long, or a gel pen and there's a little pool of ink, it does not mean that the line is different widths. That is a characteristic of a more smooth and fluid signature. If there's retouching and patching going on, lifeless appearance, maybe slowly written with pen lefts, inaccurate depiction of size, shape, height relationships. The inaccurate depiction of size, shape, height relationships, that is, for me, how I was talking about how Lydia and I mentally go through and look at how the person actually connected the letters by signing along with them, following the path of the pen. That helps tremendously in that it will show you exactly where the inaccuracies are. And we're not talking about, the majority of the signatures that we process, and I assume you process, they are clearly a match or a no match. All of this discussion is really focused on those iffy situations, those ones where it looks like a match, but there's something that just doesn't seem right. It doesn't look like a match, but it could be. That's what this training is really for, to be able to make those determinations about the ones that are really questionable. It's easy to reject a signature when it's printed versus what's in the voter registration record is most definitely cursive. Those are clear. It's that global examination, easy peasy, gone. It's the ones where it's really, really difficult to make that determination, to make that call. And as I said, for me, really focusing on how each of the signatures was made really helps me identify where the dissimilarities or where the similarities are, and allows me to more easily accept or reject those signatures. So we've got some examples of, obviously I don't have voter signatures on ballots, so these are all going to be from petitions, but we have some evaluation here. And if you want, I would say, feel free to chime in as to whether or not, we won't go through all of them because I've got several pages, but some of these, whether or not you see more similarities than dissimilarities. For example, Emily here, or Emile, excuse me, I don't see a lot of similarities, with the exception of between these two signatures, but this is the signature we were presented, and we would not be able to find a match between these two because there are just too many dissimilarities. There is, for example, it is a single characteristic, but this has a backward cross out, that they go back over their letters. And maybe that's to cross the F, but it is much different than these. The E is even at a different slant. So this one is, this E is leaning, I would say, to the left, whereas this one is leaning forward to the right. So we would clearly, well, we would reject that one. This one is a little, it's different in that they've only provided their initials. We would accept this because we see more similarities between the letters that were provided and the initials that were contained in the voter registration record. Again, it does not have to be a one-to-one match. What I'm looking for is more similarities between the signatures. The G, the way that the G is made, how the signer circles back, doesn't lift his pen and goes straight to the next letter. The B, while this one has a pen lift, and this one appears not to, the angle of the B, the loops, is similar. So if I were to receive this as a question, I would say accept it. These are the easy signatures down here where you've got a one-to-one match, where there's hardly any variation. There's a pin dot in between the two names. Questions. Here's Liz or Elizabeth, and it's a matter of, are there more characteristics that match than don't match, regardless of the fact that she signs Elizabeth versus Liz. And in this instance, I would say that they do match. And by the way, if anybody disagrees with me, feel free to speak up. We do what we can do, and oftentimes we have differing opinions, even in-house, and those are the times that I run to Steve and say, hey, should I accept this? Liz there, the characteristics that I would focus on are the spacing. If you notice in Elizabeth, in one of those, she's got some spacing between the letters. I would also focus on how the O was made. And so while it's not one-to-one, one looks like it was made probably on a clipboard standing on the street corner versus completed at home. The signatures both end with the trailing of the E, and the letters connect in the same manner. These are all fairly straightforward. The signature down at the bottom, that, not sure what was going on, but this would be a signature that I would accept because, again, I see more similarities than dissimilarities between these items. Did somebody have a question? Okay. So we've just got a couple more pages of these. I'm not going to go through all of them because you guys have verified signatures before. You know a lot of what to look for, but what I would point out are just the things that would allow me to accept or reject a signature. So Tarina Bundy here, this would not be a signature that I would have been able to accept during signature verification. I see too many dissimilarities in that signature. The T's are made differently. The B's are made differently. The body of the B is different. The angle of the signature is different. The slope. The descender is missing from the T. In the signature on the signature sheet, there is no descender. And the descender crosses back up over the line and becomes an ascender, which is wholly absent from the exemplar signature. So I would definitely not be able to accept that. Kathleen, this would be one that I would not be able to accept. I see too many dissimilarities. I see some similarities, but I don't have the confidence. There are just too many differences. For example, the way the G was made, the way the B was made, this appears to all sit on a line where there's very little that would go below the line. This is more jagged. There's more letters that go that descend below that line. So we get more into the iffy signatures. Brian here, I would, while there are obvious dissimilarities between these signatures, this would be a signature that we would probably accept. The B's are made in the same manner, and while Y is missing from the exemplar, there is there is the start of the loop. The M is made in the same manner, although that being said, it's a little difficult to see on the screen, but I can't see whether or not the A is directly connected to the M. So this would be a signature that I would invite Lydia or another individual to help me review. The next couple of pages, I've got some signatures that show people's consistency. The signature on the left, again, is from a petition sheet, and then the signatures on the right are the exemplar, all from the voter registration record. That is amazing to me. That person's signature, because we're not talking, you know, somebody's going to complete this number of voter registration cards in a single year. This is over years, a decade. That signature does not change. Heather has a great variety of signatures. She was consistent for a while and then all of a sudden went to just a squiggle. And none of that consistency is in the signature that was on the petition sheet. All over the board, I don't even see characteristics, not of the signature as a whole, but of individual letters that I can focus on to determine a match to. There are no similarities that I can pick out between these signatures. Signatures here, Matt, again, has a great variety, but there are similarities that I see. We would not have accepted this signature just because there's the signature provided on the signature sheet is merely an initial, a single letter. But oftentimes the way that we work for initiative petitions is even determining whether or not the person is the same as the voter record that we're looking at. And so this would be enough for us to associate this signature with this voter record, but we would reject it as a no match, just because there's not enough here to actually evaluate. So we've got a couple more of these, and it's just a matter of consistency. Very consistent, very inconsistent, with no characteristics for us to say are similar. Basically, all we can say is they're both cursive, but other than that, there would be nothing for us to say that we see. Teresa, 1-to-1 match. All righty, so that actually is the end of the basic information. I would be happy to answer all questions that you may have.
Summer, this is Michelle sitting at Kim Lindell's computer. Is it harder to copy a wild signature that's just like a scribble versus somebody who has, say, Palmer cursive method? That's my first question. And second question is, if somebody is, say, right-handed, but a left-hand person tries to copy a right-hand signature, what would maybe stand out?
Some of that may be a little more granular than I'm able to answer, but what I would say is that the scribble signatures are typically very unique, and as they have no letter forms for you to necessarily focus on, you would focus on the more esoteric items, the line quality, how smooth it is, the slope of the letter, the apparent skill of the writer. Scribbles can be very decorative and very unique, so they don't necessarily denote someone who has poor handwriting characteristics or is of a particular doesn't have the same education level as somebody who has the Palmer cursive, who signs a copybook signature. So you would focus on more along the lines of the alignment, and if there were any kind of, if there were multiple squiggles, what the spacing was, where they set on the line, what direction the squiggles were pointing, were they trailing, did they have an end stroke that really extends. People, it is very, very challenging to write, to accurately or effectively sign someone else's name. When you sign your signature, you are going off of your mental model, your memory of what that signature looks like, and it's all based on those copybooks or how you were taught or how you taught yourself to sign your name. And so by signing somebody else's name, your natural instinct is to sign the way that you sign it. And so where your pen lifts are, where your stops and starts are. So it's very challenging to sublimate those impulses. So whether or not it's easy or harder to forge somebody's signature, if it's a very standard Palmer cursive method or a squiggle, I would say they're both equally as hard. It's a matter of how much you're able to sublimate your own instincts. And it's a matter, quite frankly, of how closely the person who's verifying it looks. Because ultimately, it's our responsibility to make that determination. And I will say, from my personal perspective, the squiggles are easier to identify than the Palmer cursive method, than the copybook signatures. If I have to search for a Margaret Smith, because the way that we process petition sheets is if we can't find somebody, we reject it, and then Lydia or myself will look for it. And there are times that I search hundreds of signatures. And if I'm looking at a Margaret Smith, that is can be a generational name. I have a really hard time picking the distinct characteristics in that signature because there just aren't if everybody of the same generation in the same part of the country learned how to sign their name based on the same copybook, it can be challenging. So for me personally, I prefer the squiggles. Those are much easier for me to pick apart than the copybook. And then left hand versus right hand, it's going to be about slant. But again, it's very difficult for an individual to change up their natural handwriting, to sublimate that and adopt somebody else's style. That's not to say it can't be done, but most of the time it's fairly obvious. But the way that signers are taught or have been taught in the past, if they are left-handed, there is a distinct slant quality alignment to those signatures that can be obvious, but oftentimes it isn't. But again, someone trying to sublimate their own natural handwriting, unless they have years of practice, which I'll admit to, I used to sign my mother's name to my, get out of jail free cards to get out of high school classes. So I had years of practicing that. Still, there are enough distinct differences that nobody should ever be accepting the way I sign my mother's name as a good signature. Like I said, some of the things I just don't have the depth of knowledge about the left versus right. But I personally would focus on the alignment and the slant and the slope of the signatures. More questions?
Kristen, Christopher at Lane County. I think that the initial letter in any name and the final letters would be more consistent. You find more inconsistency in the middle letters.
I have not ever focused on that per se. For me, that I would have problems asserting that just because, well, in one instance I would have problems, but in another I totally see your point. As people get busy, it's that first letter that they focus on, and then it's just a squiggle thereafter. We see that frequently on petition sheets. But the signatures that you may be looking at, or most likely are looking at, are on ballots where hopefully somebody isn't standing on a street corner in the pouring rain signing it. But I would hesitate to say focus on those, and I would fall back on evaluate the entirety of the signature, pick it apart. But I do see how you can come to that conclusion. Any other questions? If not, I will say that if you guys would be so kind as to email me who participated today so I can get a certificate out to you. For those of you who don't know it, my email address is my name, so it's summer, just like the season, .s as in Shannon, .davis @oregon.gov. And I will be happy to get those certificates out by the end of the week. I am currently working on getting the voter pamphlet to the printers, so if you would be so kind as to give me until the end of the day tomorrow, I would appreciate it. I will say that Lydia and myself, and we've got Amanda who are working on petitions. if you have questions about signatures and just about our process and the things that we look for, I've given you most of them because we follow the vote by mail manual just like you guys do. But we're happy to walk you through something, help you pick apart something, but we would never make the decision for you, obviously. That would be wholly on you. But if you need some assistance in directing your gaze, we would be happy to help. I'm not sure. I think Steve is still here. Steve, do you have anything? Or Michelle?
Hey, it's Michelle. I think Steve is on another call right now. I just want to say thank you, Summer, for presenting this training. You did a great job, and thank you to everyone who joined. We appreciate it.
And we've got the recording that we'll send out. I will send out updated, an updated PowerPoint or a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation with just so that you've got the information. And again, we're always here to help, so let us know what we can do. Otherwise, have a great day, guys, and I hope you all stay well.
You as well.
Bye.
Thanks.
guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
You.